Hello, everyone. Welcome to this event. We're so happy to have you here. Tonight, we have the incredible pleasure of hosting Monique Woodard, the founder and managing director of Cake Ventures. She has over 15 years of experience in the tech space. She's been an entrepreneur, an ecosystem builder, an operator, now an investor. And, Monique's been really at the forefront of kind of shaping the future. She has a very unique and kind of forward thinking thesis with the famous kind of three-layer cake analogy. And, her fund is focusing on demographic changes, particularly in aging, women's empowerment, and minority majority shift. So, today we're going to be digging further into kind of her journey. She's going to be giving us her insights. And we are at quite turbulent times. It's very kind of unique a period of time that we're living through at the moment. And so it's always great to be hearing from people like Monique, who are at the forefront of kind of creating change in their sectors. Tell us about how they're navigating these times right now, and give you advice on what you can be doing to kind of ride the waves here. So before we get started, this event is hosted by Desal Group's VC Lab. So we run the world's largest accelerator for new and emerging managers. And we're kind of at a stage now where we're accelerating over half of the new funds to kind of be launched globally at the moment, which is insane if you think about it. And we're co-hosting this with the Founder Institute, the world's largest accelerator network, and probably the largest kind of pre-seed founder network in the world. We're so thrilled to be doing this. And guys, today we want to make sure that you guys are also super involved in the session. So please make sure that you're using the chat on kind of the right-hand side here on AirMeet to connect with one another and introduce yourselves. If you are launching a fund, however, do not put your thesis in, especially if you haven't closed the entire fund, because that could be, construed as general solicitation. If you have questions for Monique, you'll see there's kind of a few buttons here on the right. There's the chat, and then right under it, there's the Q&A. So if you have questions for Monique, pop them into the Q&A, because I want to make sure that we get to your questions as well. And after the session, we're going to be opening up for general networking. So if you are here and want to meet members of our community, please make sure you stick around after for networking. And last but not least, you will notice that throughout the event, there's going to be people doing emoji reactions, and there's this button at the bottom with a little emoji. So, please use that when you kind of hear something that you like or that resonates with you. It's kind of our virtual kind of way of applauding speakers here. So, with that, Monique, I'm turning the focus back on you here. We're so excited to be hosting you once again today. Could you further introduce yourself for everyone here and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. This is hopefully going to be a really fun and interactive conversation. Um, Today, I'm a venture capital investor and I run my own fund called Cake Ventures. But if we go back, let's see, I was a founder twice. I started two different companies, and I also started a community of founders when I moved to San Francisco and in 2008, which is a long time ago, longer than I could have ever imagined being in one place. Um, and then I started my career in investing at 500 startups, where I invested out of their San Francisco seed fund and also did some international investing for them. And then after I left 500, I started scout investing at Lightspeed while I figured out what I was going to do next, and also worked with SoftBank on standing up um, an accelerator within the Vision Fund. And then ultimately, I decided that it wasn't in my path to join another big firm. I was going to start one, and that is how Cake Ventures came to be. I did my first close on Cake Ventures and started investing in it starting in 2020, early 2021. and successfully raised a fund one.
Thank you so much, Monique. We have a lot of people here in the audience who are either thinking of launching their funds or in the process of launching their funds. And it is quite a daunting type of, business to set up. And so, what made you kind of think, I'm going to do this by myself? I'm not just going to work for any other fund. I'm going to do my own.
Yeah, so I've always had an entrepreneurial leaning. As I mentioned, I started two companies. And so I think of starting a venture capital fund as just being an entrepreneur in another way. And I knew that it was going to be hard, but I believe that you can choose your hard. Everything is hard, right? And so um, starting a fund uh, can be really fulfilling if you go into it with like eyes wide open around what it is, what it isn't, and how to manage, all of the challenges that come with starting your own venture capital firm.
Yeah, and you've, been quite vocal about how difficult it is to launch a firm. I think I read something that was quoting you saying it's like eating glass, but also rolling around in the glass with no clothes on. And, there's a lot of people here who will relate to that. But, for anyone who hasn't had the experience, can you just kind of elaborate on the experience of, launching a VC fund and how difficult it is?
Sure. So, I mean, raising a fund one is hard for just about anyone, unless you're sort of spinning out of, a large firm like Sequoia or Andreessen or whatever. It's a little bit less hard for if you have that kind of background. But for most VCs, it's incredibly hard. It is the hardest thing that you will potentially do in your career, and it's hard because it takes a really long time. I think the average timeline for raising a venture capital fund, your first fund one venture capital fund, is around 18 months. Um, and it is a really opaque process in a lot of ways. Most fund ones are made up of individual investors, high net worth investors. I had a very different path. I actually do not have that many high net worth investors in my fund. I wanted it to be relatively institutional or institutional adjacent from the very beginning. So I have LPs like Sindana and Foundry and Bank of America and Fairview and a handful of family offices that behave a lot more like institutional investors. And I did that because I really wanted the longevity of my LP base to be around for more than one fund. But, you know, a lot of funds are really made up of individual investors, and pitching individual investors and, going after those dollars and really crafting your LP base can be really challenging. And so, I think you can't take being a fiduciary lightly. You are in charge of other people's money. And it's not meant to be easy. It is actually meant to be relatively difficult and challenging. I think there are ways in which it can be less challenging, but, you know, like I said, running a fund is really fulfilling, and it is also really hard, but you choose your hard, and this is sort of the hard thing that we've all chosen.
Yeah, I love that so much. And, when you were going through that experience of launching Cake Ventures, you probably had a plan in mind and an idea of what that may or may not look like. But, looking back, what was the most surprising aspect of launching the fund? Something that you weren't really ready for or expecting to experience?
I mean, honestly, there wasn't a lot that I was surprised by. I had been in venture already and had been at 500 startups in particular and seen those processes up close, right? Seeing them raise funds and seeing, the internal satellite of funds that exist within 500 startups. And so I can't really say that there was a lot that was surprising. Like there were no really surprising things that happened. Um, LPs flake, that's not surprising. Um, LPs are difficult to pin down, and you have to like figure out how to get everyone from hanging around the hoop to actually making a commitment. I don't think that was surprising. The biggest uh a lot of your activity is less about investing in companies and deal making and more about admin and operations in the beginning. So that's not surprising. So I can't really say that there were a lot of surprising things, but that's because I came from the industry already and had seen a very large firm, and the internal workings of that firm. And so there weren't a ton of surprising things.
And so, a lot of people now go through VC Lab and stuff like that when they want to launch a fund, but you obviously sadly didn't. So who did you have mentors? Did you have a support system? How, did you
Yeah.
surround yourself with people, organizations to help you?
Yeah, I have great mentors like Kate Mitchell, who started Scale Venture Partners, and a few others. I think I'm a Kaufman Fellow, and my cohort and the people in my cohort have been incredibly helpful in providing advice and feedback. And so there are lots of different ways for you to create that kind of support system and network for yourself. I know a lot of VCs who spun out of 500 startups and started their own firms, and we remain very close. So, I have that network. I think it's really about using your background wisely to create networks of support for yourself, wherever they might exist, whether it's a program like VC Lab or a program like Kaufman Fellows or, a venture fund that you worked at before and you have alumni from that firm. There are lots of different ways to get to a support system, but I think it's most important that you do find a support system and find people who have done this before and done it in ways in which you also want to do it. And so I think that is really important. And I would say, um, having someone who started a long storied firm like Scale as a mentor has been incredibly, incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. And Monique, obviously a lot of kind of fund building just stems from that thesis. And you have a very, very unique thesis. I love how it, connects back to the name as well. But I wonder, what was your process and kind of how did you land on that thesis? Was it trial and error? Did you know from day one that this is what you wanted to do? Or was it something that kind of evolved organically?
So I would say that the thesis evolved organically before I started Cake Ventures. So, you know, someone has said before, so this is not my quote, that um, LPs put you in business to do the thing that you are already doing well, right? So, like, I think it would have been a real leap if I had tried to start, for instance, a crypto fund, right? Because LPs would have been like, you have no background in crypto, you have done no crypto investments. Um, but I had the benefit of having done a number of investments in categories that I invest in today at Cake Ventures. So the very first deal I did at 500 Startups is a company called Blavity, which is a media platform for Black millennials and Gen Z, which speaks to the new majority layer of the cake. I also invested in a company called Silver Nest, which speaks to the aging layer of the cake. I'm an investor, an angel investor in a company called Minted Cosmetics, which speaks to the trillion-dollar female economy layer of the cake. So all of these things were things that I had already done. And so when I was thinking about thesis building for Cake Ventures, I just looked back at my track record and said, okay, what am I saying with these investments? What is the narrative? What is the through line? And realized that I had always been investing in demographic changes. And I believe that companies that accelerate at the intersection of technology and demographic changes are going to be some of the strongest companies, and most category defining companies, both today and in the future. And so that was a really, I think it was a relatively easy thesis for me to come to just because I had already been doing it. And it was really easy for me to communicate that thesis because LPs could see it in my background and track record.
Yeah, yeah, I love that so much, and you know, we see that for a lot of, you know, very successful fund managers, that's kind of exactly what it is that they have a thesis that's very true to themselves and to their background and their experience. And then, you know, when they go out and start fundraising, it just kind of radiates how much passion they have for this and how much experience they have in the space. And so LPs are like, I want to get on board. So it's, you know,
Yeah,
awesome to hear that that was the case for you. Do you have any advice here? Because I do want to get into more kind of like startup investing kind of questions, but
yeah.
for anyone here that's launching a fund, is there kind of any advice, any do's and don'ts that you would have to share with them?
Um, you know, I think launching a fund is really hard in the beginning, especially fund one. But I would say don't skimp on services like, don't skimp on things like your law firm or your auditor or your tax person or your back office provider. Like that is sort of, I think standing up a fund that is going to become a firm is how you should be thinking about, making all of those choices, and not thinking for the short term, who is the cheapest or what is the easiest, option. I think, spending a little more for truly professional grade services, is really important. And it LPs like see that and see that you are coming to the table as a professional and as a professional fund manager, and that resonates, and goes a long way with them.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone, if you do have questions for Monique, please make sure you put those in the Q&A section of the chat. We won't be monitoring like, you know, main chat for questions. And, you know, I'm kind of filtering these through to Monique. So if you have questions, do put them in the chat before we run out of time here. Awesome. So, Monique, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about your investments. Obviously, you know, again, very unique thesis, very relevant at this point in time. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe highlight one or two portfolio companies and what drew you to those companies?
Definitely. So, let's see. I will tell you about a company called Pamper, which is, a beauty company. I don't do a lot of CPG, or beauty, but I found myself really, um, impressed by this founder and really impressed by what she was building. And it is a press-on nail company, and it is one of the, strongest performing companies in the portfolio. I can't tell you what their revenue was last year, but, it was incredibly impressive. Um, and, I think a lot of VCs would not have seen this as a company that they should invest in, and also would not have seen, the market potential of a company like that. But when I think about the trillion-dollar female economy, I know that women are spending more money on beauty and skincare, and nails as a category has been one that, while women spend a lot of money in the category, has been, um, almost not untouched, but there haven't been a ton of, um, big companies coming out of the nail industry lately. Whereas you have a lot in like skincare and makeup. You have Drunk Elephant, which had a big outcome. You have lots of companies in skincare that have had big outcomes, and that is one that, I think speaks to the uniqueness of my thesis, and also speaks to like the way that I see companies and way that I see, opportunities. There's another company in my portfolio called Guaranteed, which is end of life healthcare. And so really trying to use technology to change uh, the end of life for people as they get older or as they enter into hospice care. That obviously fits into the aging and longevity layer of the cake. And that company is also doing extremely well. And I have been incredibly impressed with the founder, Jessica McGlory, who started that company and continues to like close payer contracts and close, really accelerate that company in a way that is incredibly impressive. And so, um, you know, when I think about categories that I look for, Cake is very much a generalist firm, and I am a generalist investor with a thesis around demographic change. And so I invest across things like consumer, I invest um, in digital health, I invest in the future of work, especially deskless work or non-office work. And so there are many categories that can fit into the Cake Ventures thesis, which I think is really important as you're thinking about building a thesis for your firm, that you not go too narrow, and that so that you are able to actually capture some of the biggest companies.
I love that so much. Those are two brilliant, even just kind of ideas of startups there, and it's awesome. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about aging population and increased kind of longevity. I think we've been hearing about longevity a little bit more recently, but aging population is something that kind of hasn't really hit the mainstream, I feel right now. And so, what are kind of some of the opportunities in that space? If you can just kind of draw a picture of where we are today and kind of where that whole sector is headed to.
Yeah. So in 2023, the number of people over the age of 55 outpaced the number of children under the age of 15. So we have a rapidly in the United States. So we have a rapidly aging population in the US. And you can also see that kind of aging population in countries like Japan and Korea and just about anywhere. And so you can't really think about and invest in longevity, right? So things that help us live longer, healthier, happier lives without also thinking about the pressure of the aging and older population on things like the healthcare system as our populations get older and start to live longer. Like those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so some of the opportunities within aging are things like how do you help people age in place or age in their homes for as long as they can or want to safely without having to go into an assisted living facility or a nursing home? How do you help people? How do you help? What are the healthcare interventions that someone may need as they start to age? Things like guaranteed for end of life healthcare. Um, uh, what are the How do you think about things like retirement, right? We are in an age where people are pushing off retirement for longer and often don't have the financial security to retire, nor in some cases do they want to. And so, what does a new flavor of retirement look like as our population ages? So, those are just like a few of the things that I think about when it comes to aging. Also, caregiving is a huge and important part of that. How do you help and support both the family caregiver who often ends up taking care of an aging loved one, usually a parent? I'm an investor in a company called Tender Care, which is an AI co-pilot for caregiving. So helping someone, usually, an adult child, take care of their parent by giving them access to healthcare records and all of the financial information that they might need to really take over and be the co-pilot for a person as they get older.
I love that so much. And Monique, you mentioned AI, and that's kind of been headlining and actually just super ingrained in our day-to-day lives already. And
Mhm.
I wonder how the rise of AI has impacted or influenced your investment decisions um, at all?
Yeah, so I think, everyone is very bullish on AI right now. Every investor, wants to be investing in AI companies. I think, you know, the place where we find ourselves today is very reminiscent of the place where we were when mobile was new and nascent, right? Where everyone was like very excited about investing in mobile. And now everyone is very excited about investing in AI. And at some point, mobile just folded into technology. Like everything was mobile. And at some point, AI will also fold into broadly technology. Um, so I really look for companies. I don't invest in what I would call AI companies. I invest in companies that are solving a problem for a certain group of people, and they are using technology to do that. And that technology today happens to be AI. Um, and so that's really the lens through which I look at companies. And yes, I ask every company, how are you using AI to solve this problem? If they're not using AI, I think that's a huge red flag at this point. But it may be in, um, their own back office or their own operations, or it should certainly exist on their engineering teams, right? They should be using AI coding and engineering tools, but it can also be very much front facing. So facing out to the consumer or out to the purchaser. Um, but it shouldn't be AI for the sake of just being AI.
And when you look at the different layers of your thesis, so aging and longevity, the female economy, rise of the new majority, is AI generally seen as a threat or an opportunity when you think about kind of the future of these sectors of the population, in your view?
I mean, I'm a techno optimist, so I see AI as generally positive for the world. I think there will be um, jobs. If we think about like part of my deskless work interest, right? So things like healthcare jobs, infrastructure jobs, manufacturing jobs, things like that. Uh, a lot of these jobs may be changed, let's call it, and some functions may be eliminated you by the use and rise of AI. But I also believe that AI can help professionals, for instance, healthcare workers, do their jobs better and eliminate the parts of their jobs that are often challenging, and often challenge them in being able to do the more important and high level and higher order of thinking parts of their jobs. So, we've seen the rise of AI scribes in healthcare. That has definitely accelerated the ability of healthcare workers to not need to scribble down every little thing that you say during a visit, right? And then allow the healthcare worker to actually connect with the patient and give more clinical advice as opposed to like spending their time writing everything down, or typing everything in. So I think a lot of the opportunity in AI is about how do we use AI to make these jobs better and more efficient. And yes, that will mean the elimination of some jobs or the evolution of some jobs. But I think net that is absolutely fine.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't wanna get political here, but, there's kind of a new world order a little bit now with tariffs and, everything that's going on, and that really touches on kind of the consumer. It touches on, kind of fast-moving consumer goods, and then it kind of
Mhm.
trickles down to other kind of layers of the economy, but, is that something that's kind of you're taking into account now when you're making investment
Yeah.
decisions? And I'm just kind of asking because a lot of people are launching or investing in these kind of spaces. So I'd love your view on how you're thinking about everything and just kind of adapting your strategy around what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about a company in certain categories where there is a product to be manufactured, I think you have to, as an investor, question how is that manufacturing done? Where is it being done? And how do tariffs impact the future of that company? And I think we're at a really uncertain point in time where we don't really know what exactly is going to happen. Um, as I said, I don't do a ton of, you know, physical good related companies. I don't invest in that category a lot, but I do have a handful in the portfolio. And so you have to ask the questions of, okay, how does this impact this company? How does this impact margins? Do they pass along the margin? Do they pass along the tariff to their consumers? If so, how does that impact the consumer sentiment around the company? Like these are all sort of like a checklist of questions that you're sort of trying to understand as the landscape shifts. But ultimately, I think if you invest in the strongest founders and the strongest companies that you can, um, with an eye toward the future and the way that you know the future will evolve, that's all you can do as an investor. I don't think you can predict the market or time the market you know or anything like that. um, I do believe in having like a diversified pool of investments. Like if I had all CPG investments, that might that would open me up to more risk and a bigger challenge in that, if you have so many CPG companies, then all of them may not be able to survive like a tariff situation. But if you have a diversified portfolio of companies where maybe some are physical goods and a lot of them are software and a lot of them are something else, then you have you created a more diversified portfolio and you've lowered your risk profile across the portfolio itself. So while I don't think investors can predict what will happen, I think we can do a lot for ourselves by just being broadly diversified.
Yeah, I love that so much. Are there any kind of sectors or areas or types of founders perhaps that you think investors should be paying more attention to at the moment?
Yeah, I think right now a lot of VC is all AI and defense. And I think everyone gets very excited about like a handful of categories all of a sudden. And right now, everything is AI and defense. And I think there are so many more problems out there to be solved and being solved by so many more people, that we have to look around and see, what the big opportunities are. I think as I mentioned, I think there's a ton of opportunity in the future of non-office or deskless work, um, which, I think there are a number of VCs who have kind of, seen that as an opportunity, especially with the recent IPO of Service Titan and seeing like their success. I think a lot of VCs are now starting to pay attention to sort of blue collar work, non-office work, non-white collar work, deskless work, things like that. Um, but I think we could still be accelerating technology and accelerating investments in that space even more. So I am very bullish on that category, and that's an area where I'm leaning in on for both this fund and future funds. So yeah, I think that's one area, but I think there are so many different problems to be solved in everything from like healthcare to infrastructure to manufacturing. All of those categories have big challenges that I think technology can be additive to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into kind of some audience questions here. Everyone, if you do have questions, put them in the chat in the Q&A section. You'll also see that you can upvote other people's questions. So we won't have time to go through everything, but maybe the most upvoted questions. But I will do my best to get through all of them. So I love this question here from Christine. She's asking, what common misconceptions, sorry, do founders have when pitching to impact driven firms like yours, and how can they better align their narrative with your mission?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily consider my firm an impact firm. I'm not an impact investor. I believe that all investments have impact and they will have either positive, negative, or neutral impact. And as investors, I think the most successful companies are either positive impact on the world or neutral. And so I try to align my investments with kind of that sentiment of like what's going to be like the most successful kind of investment. A lot of impact LPs definitely don't think I'm an impact investor, so that's also a thing. But I think just like really understanding for anyone, understanding like what types of companies an investor, a VC likes to invest in, and how that fits in, how your company fits into their thesis is kind of table stakes, right? And being able to like clearly articulate the why behind the company is a way to kind of like get over the line with a lot of investors. For me, for instance, sometimes people try to pitch things that I've coined the terms like naturally gated versus artificially gated. So an artificially gated product or company is one in which you're building, let's say Uber for Latinos, right? Uber for Latinos is Uber. Like there is no need to like gate a product like that. On the other hand, if you are building a women's health product for new moms, um, that is a naturally gated product because you are using the natural gating of the category to create the product and to speak to like that specific consumer. And so I think like understanding and like the why of the way that you are crafting your product and the why for me of demographic change um, is kind of imperative to like getting VCs to like understand what you're doing and care.
Yeah, and you said something there, you're kind of like, I'm not an impact VC. And there's a lot of kind of VCs right now that are launching ethical firms, investing in ethical companies that will kind of advance the quality of life of people and the health of the planet. But they're, kind of a little bit like yourself, like, but it's not an impact fund. So where is the line? Where does an impact fund kind of end, and kind of these firms that are mission driven and kind of are investing in products and services that will ultimately improve the lives of people and the planet, um, begin?
Um, I don't know. I am here to deliver returns to my LPs, uh, and I believe that I can do that by investing in companies that make the world a better place. And I've been able to articulate that vision to many LPs. And ultimately, I'm here to invest in like the best companies and the best founders I can. If some of them happen to be mission driven or impact companies, then that's great. If they don't see themselves as like mission oriented, that's also okay. Like, yeah, I just invest in great companies.
I love that. Aaron is asking, Monique, hi, what are some recommendations for founders when reviewing terms? What deal slash language would you stay away from? What should we lean into?
Um, I would say make sure you have a great lawyer. And like I said on skimping on um, professional services, you know, make sure you have a great lawyer who understands venture capital and understands venture terms and can guide you in the right direction. And don't sign anything without having a lawyer read it.
Yeah, that's great. Grace is asking, Monique, what are your thoughts on how the VC fundraising experience could be made easier for new and promising founders, specifically in ways that that make it kind of less onerous for them to kind of fundraise for their next round?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of fundraising is just how opaque, the industry can be sometimes. You never know who's actively investing, who's investing in your category, um, where they are in their fund cycle. And so I think more transparency uh, who who's actively investing and what they invest in is always going to be beneficial for founders. So I try to be as transparent as possible around like what I invest in and what I don't invest in, and why founders should come to me, and in times when I'm like, yeah, that's not a thing that I invest in or a company that I find myself compelled by. I tend to be, pretty straightforward about that. Um, I think a lot of VCs try to preserve optionality, and be a little too, they can just be a little bit less less clear than I think they should be. And so I think VCs being able to deliver clarity for founders is really important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I agree, sometimes it's not very clear kind of what the thesis of the fund is or what stage exactly
Hmm.
or geography you're investing in. And so there's kind of like a real call from the community for to investors being like, "Hey, tell us what you're investing in."
Yeah.
So I love that you're like super open about that and you want to make that clear for people.
Exactly. I mean, certainly a lot of people try to pitch me things that are companies that are outside of the US or outside of North America, and I don't invest outside of the US right now. And so I think, you know, being able to like understand what a VC does and does not do is really, really important. And, VCs also being like really transparent and open about what they do and don't do is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Raheem is asking, Monique, can you share more information about the process of building credibility with your first LPs and investors? You mentioned seeking institutional investors from the get go. What helped you get the
Yeah.
meetings and FaceTime with these investors?
I think I was willing to raising a venture fund is all about sales, and the sales cycle for fund to funds, like the funds that are the LPs that are in my fund, um, can be a little bit longer, but I believe that that's beneficial because they are they're more evergreen VCs, right? They'll be around for more than one fund. Um, I think I had the benefit of having, you know, uh, I was a known entity. People knew me from my prior investing, and so I was able to open a lot of doors in that way. and use my network to open other doors where I didn't have strong connections. And so I really thought about when I was raising Fund One, I thought about it as I'm not just raising Fund One, I'm raising Funds One through Three. And the conversations that with LPs who are not Fund One LPs are not a waste of time because they might be a Fund Three LP or they might be a Fund Two LP. And while you do have to think about and optimize for closing Fund One, I think you should also be, you know, willing to have those conversations that set the clock ticking on a longer term relationship. And so I think, sometimes when we're in the mix of trying to raise a first fund, we get very short-sighted about the types of conversations that we're having. And we want to have conversations only with people who are willing to invest in a fund one, willing to invest in an emerging manager, willing to do all of these things, when you actually should be optimizing for the longer term relationships if you are trying to build a longer term firm.
Yeah, and kind of as you were saying that, it kind of links back to the issue that startups have with some VCs. It's kind of like, well, I don't know if you're investing as first time founders or first time
Yeah, yeah,
this or this sector. And it's kind of the same a little bit on the VC side, with the LPs. It's like, I don't know if you are investing in fund one or fund two or this type of thesis. So, yeah, uh, right. There's a question here from Christine who also wants to kind of know, when you were navigating those conversations with LPs, how did you handle situations where they maybe didn't immediately get your thesis and what the fund was about?
yeah. I think a lot of LPs didn't get the thesis. I think that has only come with time because now they can see the companies that are in the portfolio and it's not a blind pool anymore, right? So I would get, oh, so you invest in companies that are impacted by demographic change, so you invest in female founders, or you invest in um, minority founders. And I don't not invest in female founders. I don't not invest in founders of color, but not the that's not what the fund is about, right? And so I think a lot of LPs just frankly got it wrong around what I was investing in. And I think it's okay for people to be wrong about you. It kind of eliminates them from your pool, unless you're willing to do the education and you find it valuable to do the education for that LP. And then they can be brought along on the journey with you, right? I think some LPs did not understand it, and now they do because they have been able to see the types of companies that I invest in, and that's great. Maybe they'll be fund two LPs, maybe they'll be fund three LPs. Um, and one of the things that I was able to do that I do believe helped a lot, especially in Fund One, I've always written a lot about my work and my thesis. And, I've been on podcasts and I speak at conferences. I'm very vocal about like what I do. And I think that actually really helped a lot for LPs who were sort of on the edges of my network who didn't really understand what I was building or what I was doing or didn't understand demographic change in the way that I think about it in the way that I invest in it. I think that was uh, helpful in having them be able to like understand what a portfolio might look like even before I had one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we kind of talk about this a lot within our community too, that the LPs of the fund manager you're ultimately kind of creating a little bit of a community as well, like amongst your LPs, and that it's, you will encounter a lot of people. It doesn't matter what your thesis is, you will encounter people who just don't get it, and
Yeah.
you just move on, right? And it's okay, and you wanna be surrounded by people who get it and are in it 100%, from day one. So, yeah, that was really
Yeah,
good.
don't bang your head against a wall making people try to understand you. Like, just
Exactly.
optimize for the people who get you and who get what you're doing and like and want to be on the journey with you. Like I'm not here to convince anyone of
Exactly.
anything.
Yeah, so Karen Sheffield here, who is part of our community and who I absolutely adore. Hi, Karen, I see you. She's asking, what was
Hi.
the most helpful thing an LP has done for you besides writing a large check?
um, I'm hiring a venture partner, and the best candidates have come through my LPs. And so when I'm thinking about firm building, anything that helps me build a firm faster, easier, or get to people that I want to get to, whether that's for hiring or, making new LP connections. Like my LPs have been wonderful about opening up their networks for me.
Amazing. We're quickly nearing the top of the hour here. I do have two final questions that I want to ask you. So
Yeah.
the first one is, again, kind of going back to kind of these rapidly changing times that we're going through. I think it's a little bit unsettling a lot of the times, especially for founders. Do you have any advice for startup founders today who are looking to thrive in today's market? What should they be doing or thinking about, or handling the situation?
Yeah, I would say don't be reactive to whatever is happening on the news for any given day. And know that the thing that you're building is not something for, the next 18 months. It is something for like the next 7 to 10 years, right? And so taking a much longer term view of the future and of what you're building is key. I think people who are trying to optimize and build things for today don't may not realize that like the world could be very, very different in 3 years or 4 years or 7 years for sure. And so while it's necessary to understand like um, the ways in which things are changing, I think it's much more interesting to like think about what a future state could be and then use your vision of that future state to like, you know, bend the world to you.
Yeah, yeah, I love that so much. Monique, you released a white paper recently on kind of the aging populations, Gray New World. We're gonna link that in the chat. But is there kind of anything that you want to say about that, the white paper?
Yeah, I released it because I was talking to so many founders about go-to-market strategy for a senior or aging population, and so many of them didn't realize that today's aging is happening on multiplayer mode. So you're not just trying to reach and sell to the aging adult; you are also often reaching and selling to their support network of caregivers. And that's a really important distinction because it impacts the channels that you might use, how the product might be received, how you are talking about the product, and ultimately who is the purchaser versus who is the decision maker. And so I wrote, in collaboration with Springbank, a report on that, and you can find it at www.graynewworld.com/caregivers.
I love that so much. That's super fascinating. Everyone, we link that in the chat, so go and check it out. It's absolutely worth it. Finally, Monique, one last question for me. What is next for
Yeah.
Cake Ventures? How do you see things evolving from here on for you?
More of this for sure, more of the same. But I'm also, I'm not just building a fund, I'm building a firm. And so it's really thinking about going from one person or two people to three people, right? And building out the team and the support network and hiring and all of those sorts of fun things. So and just getting better at all of the things that make up, being a fund manager.
I love that so much. Everyone, please give a final round of applause for Monique Woodard from Cake Ventures. Monique, thank you. You were wonderful. Thank you for, being so generous with your advice and your insights with everyone here today. Thank you. And yeah, best of luck for
Thank you.
everything.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. All of the best. Bye bye.
Bye.